So next we have Martin Round, who is a director from Spacecraft, and Spacecraft is actually a design and build outfit. So they will not only they've not only designed these different spaces, but also help coordinate a lot of all the different trades, and a lot of that also helps them make sure that they can really be thoughtful around the craftsmanship of what they actually create. Alongside their ethos of craftsmanship is a deep ethos of making sure that a lot of their builds are reflective of a sustainable design ethos, and making sure they work very well passively, and also thinking about what types of materials are required to actually create these outcomes. So if you could please join me in welcoming Martin to the front, that'd be greatly appreciated. Yes. And here you are.
Thank you.
And you're off.
G'day everyone. Yes, so Martin from Spacecraft. I started building as soon as I left university. I studied architecture and started a building company to try and tackle the disconnect between architecture and construction. And so this was a project about 1.5 years ago. We finished this in the Adelaide Hills, quite a cold, wet climate that we were tackling. And it was a small master suite for the client attached to an old poured earth building. So it was about an 1880s old barn where they used shutter work. This is the old barn that you can just see to the right hand side. So they used shutter work and they poured earth in there, and when we cut the doorway through, you could see it was just mud and grass and rocks. I don't even think there was any lime in it. And that inspired us to sort of think about what material we're going to create the extension from. So we needed good insulation, we needed good breathability, because condensation is an issue in climates where you've got cold outside temperatures and warm, moist inside temperatures. And we'd been playing with the idea of hemp. We'd sort of seen it used a bit, which is a hemp and lime combination. And the client was really impressed with the idea and took a punt. I think we were the second construction in Adelaide to use the hemp lime technology. And so she was really on board, which is the main thing when you're doing these kind of new materials. And for us, we want to start challenging what sort of materials we are using in buildings. We do a lot of demolition. Like Ken said, we're very hands-on designers and builders. We're often seeing the stuff that we pull out of old buildings and realising, well, where does a lot of that stuff go? And the beauty about the hemp lime mixture is we build to last, but if it does come to a time when the building ends its life, most of it can be returned to the earth. So here's the hemp. I guess it's a few things about hemp, if you're not aware of it. It is, in my view, a very sustainable material. It's breathable and it helps regulate humidity and condensation. As we seal buildings better, there's a big push to seal drafts out of buildings. You can get issues with condensation in your wall fabric, causing mould and other problems. It's a good insulator. It's not quite as good as what Sam's running in the straw bale house there. So our building, we had a 300 wide wall, which gives you about an R3.5, plus other layers of skin and venting that we put on and render. So that's just the hemp element. But also has a thermal mass, so it regulates the temperature fluctuations in the building. We were in a bushfire zone, so great for bushfire safety, which is more of an issue in the hills these days. It's pest and mould resistant. It's recyclable and biodegradable, and it's renewable. And as the hemp industry takes off in Australia, we're just getting to the point where we can start to have supply chains. And supply chain is the biggest issue with the new material. It's expensive. This was all imported from France, the lime and the hemp, but you've got to start somewhere. One thing I really like about it is it is essentially a conventional timber frame, so it's a very accessible technology for building the building industry. So conventional timber frame, a few modifications to work with the hemp, and some work around lintels over doors where you're needing to hold up the mass of the hempcrete. There's a few different ways you can use hempcrete. We chose the poured in situ, so it's using a formwork that you fill with the hemp lime mix. There's other technologies such as blocks and sit panels that are less used in Australia. So far, there's been a lot of cast in situ. So yeah, here's sort of a lintel detail. A lot of this detailing we had to work out ourselves. There's not really great manuals on hemp building, so it is a little bit of using our knowledge as designers and builders to come up with the most efficient way of putting this material together. Similarly to Sam's build, get the roof on first, frame up, roof on, and then you can work in a protected environment. Similar to straw bale, you're running power feeds in conduits, and there's a little bit of extra work around protecting steel components such as bracing, nails and screws, because the corrosive nature of the lime means that they need to be protected. And then onto the mixing. So the hempcrete mixture is just the hemp hurd, which is the inner pith of the stem. It's not the fibrous. A lot of people think it's the fibrous part of the plant. It's actually the pith of the plant, which has an air volume which helps create that insulation factor. It's mixed with lime and water, and that's as simple as that. It's poured into a formwork and lightly tamped. You don't want to press it too hard because you're trying to leave air pockets in there so that you've got the insulation value. And really, some of the formwork we were removing a few hours after it had been filled, which means that you can then slide the formwork up and do the next section. And in our case, so there's a 300 thick wall with the timber frame to the outside, which allows you to attach the cladding to the outside. You can render the outside. So there's a few different ways you can set up the layering in hemp depending on the finish. Because it was a particularly wet environment, we decided to clad so that because we didn't have huge eaves, it just allowed us to have better water protection. And so that's it there. On the inside, we used a lime render with a little bit of oxide in it. Similar to Sam's place, you get these beautiful textures that are just a really nice sort of suede look. And choosing to leave a truth window, just exposing a little bit of that grain of the hemp. And the building in the centre was about 5 metres tall, so we had some quite large pores of hemp, which does make it probably not the most cost effective. The higher you go, the harder it gets to install the hemp. Sure, I've got another slide there somewhere. Oh, sorry. Outside we use the shosugi barn, which is a charred cypress, which just gives that beautiful earthy look. Everything's double glazed. We put a lot of attention into sealing the building and taping all of the roof junctions. Passive solar features, just in terms of getting light, ventilation as well, were important. And then similarly to the straw bale house, we don't do the hemp in the bathroom because it's just too hard to waterproof, and the layering becomes complex, and insulation's less critical in those rooms. An extensive use of cypress, so the black cladding is cypress, and also the fence material is cypress, which is a reasonably sustainable timber, although it's getting harder and harder to get these days. Yeah, and that's I guess the end of it. Looking to the future, this was a test case for us to see how the material worked. It was a fairly expensive build. It works out around the same as double brick, so it's right up there in terms of price. So we're now looking at trying to find efficiencies and different building technologies using the same material that can allow us to do it cheaper. We're investing some time and money into SIPs in the hope that that can be an easier way of using the material. One of the big problems with the hemp is it takes a long time to dry. So we cast it in situ, and before you can render it on the inside or clad it on the outside, you need to leave it for at least a month. It's also very temperamental in terms of the weather that you're installing it in. So if it's too hot, it dries too quickly, you get cracking. If it's too cold, it won't dry. So it's not the kind of panacea of building materials, but I believe it definitely has some really strong properties, and that's why we're putting more energy into it. Thank you.